In Beyond the Gates, Doug's accident quickly becomes the focus of suspicion, because everything happens so neatly, so cleanly, like a play directed down to the last detail. A car crashed into a tree, a raging fire, a bottle of whiskey left behind as evidence enough to close all questions about drunk driving. But to Jacob, every detail suggests a sophisticated staging. He sees in every fragment, every statement, every gesture of the people involved a cold abnormality. The man who lived with Doug, who had seen him struggle with gambling addiction, knew that Doug, though fallen, was not stupid enough to throw himself into such a ridiculous death. It was that perfection that was the scariest thing, and Jacob could not escape the feeling that someone had arranged it behind it. Doug is not innocent. He is in debt to the casino, sliding in losing streaks with Joey, who is always thirsty for power, money, and does not hesitate to use Vanessa as a pawn. Eliminating Doug could be a step to pave the way for Joey to get closer to his goal of seizing Vanessa, and at the same time wiping out a troublesome debtor. But Marcel, Jacob's father, his shadow lingers in this dark picture, making Jacob confused between family and intuition. Before the accident, Marcel sat with Doug at the card table, not only robbed Doug of his small winnings but also constantly gave him alcohol. The way Marcel provoked, mocked, and pressured made the atmosphere in the casino thick with a dangerous smell. And then, when Doug rarely had a winning hand, Marcel threw out a strange sentence. "You won't need this money where you are going." A drunken remark? Or is it a cold-blooded omen for a premeditated death? The more Jacob remembered, the more he shuddered. Marcel seemed to have no intention of hiding his contempt for Doug, nor his ironic attitude towards Vanessa, who was collapsing in pain. After the accident, when everyone was trying to find words of comfort, Marcel just shrugged his shoulders with a cruel indifference. He said that Doug's death was just karma, that he brought it on himself because of weakness and stupidity. Jacob was stunned by his own father's indifference. His heart was clenched with conflict. Was Marcel just cold-hearted? Or was he also an accomplice in this tragedy? Those contemptuous words, instead of easing the pain, deepened the suspicion. Jacob began to see his father no longer as a person who taught him morality, but as someone who kept a dangerous secret. Meanwhile, Randy's figure opened up a fragile ray of hope. Could it be that Doug was not dead? That in the chaos of the fire, Randy had managed to pull him back from death? An unexplained death is often fertile ground for suspicion. If Doug is alive, his return will be a storm that blows away all the lies, exposing those who pushed him to the brink. But if Doug is truly dead, then that bottle, that sentence, and Marcel's strange calm will forever haunt Jacob, forcing him deeper into the maze of conspiracy. Jacob enters the station with a heavy heart, confiding to Malone that the job has never been so difficult. He is an investigator, a witness, a son torn between truth and family. He looks at Vanessa, broken, devastated by tragedy, and his heart is filled with compassion. But when he turns to Marcel, all he gets in return is a shrug. An invisible distance, cold as a steel wall, builds between father and son. Jacob senses that something is rotten in his own family, and to find out the truth about Doug, he may have to face the most terrible possibility: that his own flesh and blood is involved. Every decision now is a double-edged sword. If Jacob continues to investigate, he could tear his family apart, put Marcel under suspicion, expose Joey, and ignite a new war. But if he stops, accepting Doug's death as an accident, he will live his life in the shadow of lies, leaving Vanessa trapped in an unpredictable trap. Jacob's simmering anger is not only directed at the suspicious people around him, but also at himself, for having to choose between justice and family, between truth and safety. Doug's accident is no longer a personal tragedy, but has become a rift that tears apart the fragile bonds of community and family. Every word, every action of Marcel, Joey, or Vanessa sows more doubt. Jacob is now caught in a maze of secrets, lies, and betrayals, where every step could turn him into the enemy of his loved ones. And most terrifyingly, He begins to understand that to find the truth about Doug's death, he may have to accept losing everything. Vanessa is caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, where love, betrayal, and doubt are intertwined in a tangle that leaves her breathless. Doug has been her anchor and her pain, a man she can't quite trust but can't quite cut off. Joey appears as a force both seductive and sinister, stirring in her a sense of control and attraction. Marcel, with his cold eyes and contemptuous tone, always seems to know more than he'll admit. Doug's death, or at least the accident that's been declared a given, puts Vanessa at the center of a maze of intrigue. She finds herself the one who holds the key to revealing the truth, but also the one who will pay the highest price if the secret is revealed. If Doug is truly alive, things will unravel in ways no one could have predicted. Joey's plan to destroy Doug and take Vanessa will fall apart, forcing him to reveal his true colors when confronted with someone he thought had been eliminated. For Vanessa, such a return will be a double sentence. Both a hope that the person she loved was not gone forever, and a haunting as the truth forces her to choose between returning to Doug or continuing a life bound by the manipulators around her. And for Marcel, if Doug still exists, all the conspiracy and all the cruel words he has uttered will be cast in a new light, turning his cold image into naked cruelty. The unusual details pile up, making it impossible to dismiss it as a normal accident. The whiskey bottle left behind is too perfect to close the story of drunk accident. The lack of direct witnesses makes Doug's death seem like a staged performance. And the lack of a body clearly only fuels suspicions that it's all just the beginning of a larger deception. The cracks in this event not only open up an opportunity for Jacob to investigate, but also instill in the audience a belief that Doug is still out there somewhere, waiting for the moment to return to turn the tables. The story at this point is no longer simply about whether Doug is alive or dead. It becomes a fierce battle of trust, lies, and power, where everyone has a part of the truth, but no one is willing to admit it. Beyond the Gates keeps the audience in a state of extreme tension, forcing them to wonder. If Doug returns, will Joey be defeated? Will Vanessa dare to face the truth? And how much longer can Marcel hide his cold nature? In this world, no one comes out unscathed, and every choice has irreversible consequences. Jacob, of all people, is the one pushed into the darkest corner. He saw the abnormality, heard his father's harsh words, felt Vanessa's desperate pain. But he also understood that suspicion was not enough to pull down the curtain. He needed proof. Maybe Randy, a seemingly obscure figure, was the link he needed. If Randy really appeared at that fateful moment, maybe he knew more than what was being exposed. And if Randy sought Jacob's help, it would not only be a sign that a secret was alive, but also a chance for Jacob to prove that his suspicions were not in vain and end that maze of conspiracy. Jacob had to face the truth that he might be the only one brave enough to dig deeper, even if accepting the truth could destroy his family, his love, and his life. But the urge inside him grew stronger. If Doug was really alive, then silence was synonymous with guilt, and the truth would never forgive those who chose to turn their backs. The accident that seemed to have ended Doug's life not only did not bring closure, but also opened a deep hole of doubt, pushing everyone involved into a tense spiral between truth and lies. Jacob, with haunted eyes, constantly examined every detail of the scene, not accepting this death as a matter of course. A burning car, a faint brake mark, and a whiskey bottle left in the right place. All seemed to be arranged to lead people to a single conclusion. Doug was drunk and self-destructed. But the more Jacob looked, the more he felt a shiver, because that perfection was not accidental, but the trace of a hand that had directed the entire tragedy. And from there, pent-up doubt began to penetrate every relationship, every word, every look of the survivors. Doug was no stranger to downfall, a gambling addict, often trapped in Joey's financial and power trap. But this time, it seems that Joey doesn't just want to collect debts. He wants to eliminate Doug as the last obstacle to possessing Vanessa. Doug's death frees Joey from a troublesome debtor, and at the same time opens the way for him to take over Vanessa's broken heart. However, upon closer examination, this death bears the mark of Marcel, Jacob's father. Before the accident, Marcel had gambled with Doug, not only robbing Doug of his rare winnings but also constantly getting him drunk. In the moment when Doug was happy because he won against Joey for the first time, Marcel let out a chilling sentence. "You won't need this money where you're going." Those words were not just mockery, but like a prearranged omen. Jacob, remembering this detail, couldn't help but shiver, because that coldness and sarcasm were like a pre-calculated death sentence. Vanessa now became the center of the tragedy, where love, betrayal, and suspicion intertwined into an inescapable burden. She had just lost the man she had been with, had been drawn into Joey's ruthless power play, and was haunted by Marcel's merciless disdain. Marcel made no secret of his disdain, telling Jacob that Doug died because of karma, that he brought it on himself, that drunkenness is stupid, and that death was simply an inevitable consequence. But it was this coldness that stunned Jacob, forcing him to wonder. Was his father simply heartless, or was he the one who had orchestrated the whole thing? In addition, Randy's figure began to appear like a faint ray of light in the thick darkness. Maybe Doug wasn't dead. Maybe in the moment the car burst into flames, Randy had pulled him back from death. The lack of a clear body, the lack of direct witnesses, all became pieces of the puzzle for the hypothesis that the death was just the beginning of a more sophisticated game of deception. If Doug survives, his return will tear the veil of falsehood away, bury Joey's plans, force Vanessa into the most painful choice of her life, and force Marcel to face the possibility of being unmasked. Jacob is now not just an investigator, but a man trapped in a maze where every step could turn him into an enemy of his own family. He feels compassion for Vanessa, a woman slowly consumed by grief and surrounded by lies, but at the same time he must face the cold gaze of his father, who seems to regard human life as nothing more than a pastime. When Jacob confides to Malone that the job has never been harder, it is not just the confession of an officer, but the voice of a son grappling with the horrifying truth about those closest to him and the chaos. Vanessa holds the key, because she is not only a witness to love and betrayal, but also the link between Doug, Joey, and Marcel. If Doug returns, she will have to choose between her broken love and the cruel truth that awaits, between accepting Joey as a manipulator or fighting him to gain freedom. For Marcel, that return will be like a knife that will tear open everything he hides, turning his disdain into undeniable evidence of guilt. Beyond the Gates is no longer simply a story of an accident, but has turned it into a battle for trust, where unusual details become the spark that burns everything. Doug can return, Joey can collapse, Vanessa can find the truth, and Marcel can be unmasked. But in this world, no one escapes unscathed. Jacob, with his suspicions growing, may receive an unexpected approach from Randy, who comes for help and brings important clues. If that happens, his long-standing suspicions will no longer be in vain, and this maze of lies will open a new path, a path that leads to the truth, but may also swallow up everything he holds dear.